Welcome to What That Means with Camille Morhard.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of What That Means. Today, we're going to focus on fearless compute and what that means. I've got with me today Abhilasha Bhargav-Spantzel. She is principal engineer at Intel. She has a doctorate from Purdue University, and she focuses on hardware-based security product architecture, specifically focused on virtualization. First of all, hello and welcome.
Hi, it's very nice to be here.
Can you start by telling us what you mean by fearless compute?
Computer used to be like a tool for very specific tasks for specific people. And now, as we know, it has become an essential part and a very integral part of our lives. In various surveys, one has seen like on an average, people have 6 to 10 devices. And these are very essential for us, not just for entertainment and communication, but also for our healthcare, for our finances, etc. For something which is so important and so essential, there's a great deal of uncertainty and fear. This is something which is just not right. When we want to look at what we want to do in the future, the kids and the next generation is a really great way of assessing it. So I love working with cybersecurity education and the kids. When my 12-year-old daughter, Heidi, she basically was talking about, wouldn't it be great if we can actually download anything, build anything, create anything without that constant annoying fear of being hacked? That is exactly the concept and what we want to achieve with fearless computing.
So you're after an unhackable solution, or at least making it very, very difficult to hack.
Exactly. And not always being afraid. It's a user experience that we want to drive. Currently, if I'm talking to anyone, it's their first concept is, oh, should I click on this? Am I going to be phished if I clicked on this? Or this amazing app, everybody's talking about it, but can I download it? Or is it going to spying on me with the microphone and the camera or accessing the rest of my private data? So there's a lot of fear associated with trying new things. The ability to do that and innovate and experiment is a key idea.
I'm curious because you mentioned being hacked, which I always think of as somebody draining my bank account or posing as me. Whereas the other thing you mentioned was privacy, something being spying on me. Do you also consider that hacking?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes in all shapes and sizes, right? Like the ability to get into your account starts from being able to know who you are. So if I know this is Camille, if you love those yellow flowers, maybe there's some information that you can gather from just knowing a person. And the kids are awesome at it, like the sleuthing with social information, your favorite pet, mother's maiden name, etc. And from that comes the next level. What do you do once you've gathered enough data? And you can start sending them a mail saying, hey, I've got this amazing bouquet or this amazing deal. The next thing is being able to lure the person to clicking something. Those are the social engineering attacks, which could then result in accessing your bank account. So they're some very innocent looking information can lead to some dire consequences. So every little step matters.
Do you think that kids are better at avoiding or recognizing those kinds of attacks today than we adults are?
They're relentless. I mean, when my experience working with the kids is that they start from scratch. They're not afraid of anything, which is what we want to continue, but help them understand what does it mean? What are the signs of a phishing email? What can an attacker do if you just download this app without verifying? And showing them, we have a lot of ethical hacking sessions with them to better understand how they could compromise the system, but in turn, what some other actual bad guy could do. The ability for the kids to understand these is definitely better because they question everything. They are learning everything from scratch. Sometimes we are more trusting, like this looks good. And there's a certain generation that may go with common sense and saying, why would anyone want to call me and say that my son is in an accident and needs so much money? So you expect a certain level of decency, or that's something nobody would do the wrong things. But I like to tell the kids that, think bad, but do good. So think what else could go wrong, but at the same time, see how you can protect yourself better and protect others.
Specifically, your doctorate, you did your work around identity and security. Is that right? And you focused on cryptography and biometrics. Can you talk a little bit about how those two things play into it?
My college was like being a kid in a candy store. Like there was so many choices. There was not enough time to do research. So I actually did a lot of compilers and a lot of machine learning, and always important. But what I really liked was numbers and how cryptography came together to better protect users from identity theft. What if you were able to sign in to applications or go to a hospital and get care without having to put your social security number? Because your social security number has nothing to do with the healthcare service that you're getting. But our identity system is the front door to any access, whether it is in healthcare, finance, anything. The ability to protect that became my focus even then, and it's been almost 2 decades or so, and it's not a single day goes by with the importance of being able to protect identity through crypto, through biometrics, and actually to deal with legacy systems and bringing it all together to see how we can keep raising the bar as we go.
Well, let me ask you one thing. When we talk about biometric, this is like my fingerprint or my eye or my facial recognition. So how is it private if a system is using that to identify me?
If I take a screenshot of our conversation right now, I already know how you look, but that's not enough for me to log into a system which requires your face. A lot of the biometric authentication, for example, requires to make sure it's a 3D, a live face. A person is actually blinking. It has some temperature behind the skin, and so on. The biometric verification is about making sure it's the right person, but there's liveness analysis, there's replay attacks. Like you don't look the same any 2 days.
You're talking about making sure that it's accurate and that I can't spoof it. But I'm wondering if a system is using a biometric as a password or as authentication, then it's got to know something very personal about me, which is the shape of my face or my fingerprint. So how does that intersect with privacy?
Somebody needs to know, but that somebody doesn't have to be the whole world out there. So for example, what we built once was the ability to authenticate locally. Authenticate is that process to make sure with your very unique characteristics, is that really you? Keeping that information protected in the chip and then releasing only the password or just a cryptographic credential that says, yeah, I did the work. This person who's in front of that PC is actually Camille because I checked the distance between the eyes, I checked the face, I checked her fingerprint, etc., using not just one thing, but multiple factors. That's a concept which you will hear a lot more about in the industry called multi-factor authentication. It allows you to build confidence by verifying multiple things, how you're typing, your voice, how you're speaking, etc. A combination of that provides you this assurance that, yeah, this is Camille.
Are you saying then that that's coming out of something within the computer, let's just say, or phone itself, as opposed to being stored somewhere that it could be that in and of itself could be hacked?
It's about local authentication, like not releasing this information. Your PC, for example, is in your control. It's not going anywhere, and not too many people would have access to it and potentially use it in a ways that you did not expect it to be used. But if that same information was in the cloud somewhere, just fundamentally by design, you don't have control. You're just trusting that the cloud entity that has collected this information is only going to use for that purpose and nothing else. They're not going to match it against some known database of other features or use it for n number of other reasons. User-centric, having privacy in a way that allows you to do the most locally to get global access to a bunch of other services.
Virtualization is also, I think, by definition in the cloud for the most part. Talk to me about that.
That's a very good way of putting it, because like we talked about fearless computing, the ability to do things without fear. From one of the things that we have done is to see how fundamentally rethinking security would lead to getting ahead of the attackers. We've been losing this whack-a-mole, always getting this brand new ransomware attack and then trying to hit it, and then something else come up, and we become immune to seeing big, huge numbers of data compromises, etc. So that's not working for us. But with server side, as you said, the cloud is already virtualized, and they did it primarily for consolidation and using applications in a much more efficient way, scaling the cloud. But on the client side, this is the new thing that is happening, which is just like the server, we are working on virtualizing the client itself. Taking that PC and virtualizing it, what that means is that you can isolate your applications and your workspaces. If I'm working on Facebook and I'm having a Zoom call, just note like there are 400x, malware in Zoom. So if you just happen to jump on a Zoom call and then you have your top secret document on the other window, one potential compromise from one application could potentially compromise the entire PC in a traditional way. When you virtualize the system, there are actual partitions that allow you to work on different types of workloads and isolate them. Fundamentally, they're isolated. So if something goes wrong in one, it doesn't impact the other. And one of the key things here is just like our COVID case, the spread of the virus is the biggest thing. And what we did was we landed up isolating ourselves, social distancing. The same deal works with malware. It loves to spread. It loves to find its way into every application, down into the kernel levels and across the systems that it can reach. And if you isolate them fundamentally, its reach has already been contained, being able to ensure that it doesn't persist, it doesn't spread. So these things will help us get ahead of the curve, and we can try new things within these workspaces with more confidence.
Is this almost like a shift in use case? I mean, I think as you described it, virtualization became widely adopted on servers for better efficiency. So if I'm uploading a bunch of my photos to the cloud, for example, I don't take up an entire server for myself because I hardly have any storage compared with what a server can handle. So it would package me up with a whole bunch of other people and thereby being more efficient. And that can happen across companies. Whereas on a PC, you're saying it's less about that efficiency because I'm the only one that's going to use my PC. It's more about security, essentially isolating the individual applications or the internet versus the top secret private documents that I might have on the hard drive.
Yeah, you've got it. Yeah, it helps in the privacy and security both. And one interesting thing is it also gives you better access to things. Like virtualization, by definition, doesn't tether you to a certain types of OS, like saying, hey, are you a Windows person or are you a Mac person and so on. I want to use Linux and Android and everything on my same PC, for example. And virtualization not only brings you the security through isolation, but it can also basically allow you to do a lot more experimentation and creativity, like we talked about. Like you can try new things and you're not tied to an operating system environment. And that's another benefit.
Because the virtualization or the virtual machine layer, I guess, is underneath the operating system, on top of the hardware, but below the operating system.
Yeah, so there's something called a hypervisor. It's like a virtual machine monitor. It's a thin layer, and then it allows multiple operating systems to coexist on the same system, as if they were mini PCs on top of your actual real PC.
Well, I don't want to ask you about COVID. I want to ask you about fearless computing in the time of COVID. And as we move out past with some kind of hybrid returns to work and school, how are things going to change, I guess, particularly with respect to virtualization or privacy and security?
The sudden change that has happened, at least in the enterprise space, we'll start there. Just you and I, all of us became remote workers in a day's time. And a lot of the times there was break the glass scenario where we just needed the users to be able to access these contained applications in some way or fashion. And that's not sustainable because the threat landscape continued to grow. Nobody was waiting for things to stabilize before they can start trying to attack the systems. So there was a spike and you can see the numbers out there in the number of attacks that increased during the last several months. Being able to contain our applications, making it available to people, this combination of security with productivity becomes even more important with this whole zero trust environment, meaning that I don't have a firewall in my home. I don't have a big, huge next generation firewall and intrusion detection systems and everything protecting my work environment at home. So you have to depend a lot more on making sure that the PC, for example, has the right capabilities. Like with our vPro platform and Intel Hardware Shield, we're starting to build a lot of these capabilities as part of the system so that as you bring this PC into workspaces which you don't have control over, you can still trust it and you can still protect your IP in that. Same thing as we look at other vectors in healthcare, with the telehealth becoming so much important. You'd asked me about the identity. Like, you really want to know you're treating the right patient with the right medicines, making sure it's the right user for health insurance and other things. Education with my kids always in front of the PC. There's the idea of being able to protect their privacy and being able to continue the education in an effective fashion. We just need to make sure that the actual people behind the systems with some of the experiences that we're building.
I know you've done a little bit of work with kids. I know you're personally passionate about STEM and K through 12 cybersecurity education initiatives. And you've done some work with kids around, actually today, around COVID with some engineers. Can you talk about what you've been doing?
This is like my most favorite thing to do, just being a mom of my two little kids, as well as working with the community. It's been very energizing. If there was always this, the COVID hasn't been easy on anyone, but the kids, on the other hand, took that opportunity, working together with them, to make a lot more classes. Like, we've been doing cybersecurity education for years, but last year we accelerated it 5 times more, the number of workshops and classes, just because now kids were teaching kids about these classes. We continued to build awareness, and with that awareness came more hunger. Hey, I want to learn more. My 9-year-old son also was jumping, saying, hey, there's so many hackers out there. We need more cyber defenders, and how do we do it?
So I was talking with Claire Vishik, who's fellow at Intel also, and she was talking about how it was really important to explain, well, to anybody, but especially kids who are newer to so much online presence that they have been in the last year, of the fact that applications interact with each other and may share information. So possibly just because you're allowing one application to do something, you may not be aware of the level of, I guess, sharing, to put it nicely, or contamination, to put it less nicely, of the data. And I can't help wondering, is virtualization one way to protect against that? Like, if the kids sort of have school on one thing or personal internet, or...
Absolutely. In fact, they are a lot more familiar with this sometimes than the grown-ups. We work on virtual machines all day, making sure that I give them this little play zone, or how you want to call it, the sandbox, where they can play and try out. We do a lot of ethical hacking, even with kids almost grade 3 and above, and they understand what can happen. With cybersecurity being sometimes a bit bleak, and there's a lot of bad news. On this side, it becomes a very exciting, because they are so energetic, and they'll not stop at anything. For them, whether it's virtual, next generation virtualization, or the traditional stuff, everything is on the table. They're ready to learn and see what can happen. What really helps is our hands-on activities. Like, we actually don't just teach about that, we make them do it. And then they don't stop. They just keep learning, they keep going to the next levels. And they also apply it to very community service-driven things. So we are applying it, whatever they learn, we go to, for example, some of the senior citizen homes, and they get to teach. So we're behind the scenes at some point, and then they are the ones who are making this part of their DNA. Like, they're teaching other people, and the process learning a lot more.
So Abhilasha, I know you've specifically done some work around COVID with up-and-coming engineers. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
This was basically trying to get the underserved community access to the registration for the COVID vaccination. So while the pandemic has been very hard on all of us, but especially hard on those who don't have these compute resources, we worked together with the kids, and there were about 50 kids who volunteered in a matter of 3 days. And we got the kids together, and we trained to build this virtual phone service that allowed the people who just had access to a phone to call the kids who registered them on their PCs. As we were preparing for this and brainstorming on what we should and shouldn't, it was really great to see how the kids were thinking through how to protect from phishing attacks, how to make sure we collect the information so that it does not compromise their privacy. This was really great to see. It wasn't just getting a job done, a really important job done, but keeping security and privacy in mind. So I was very proud of them. It was a wonderful experience. And that's what we want to do, is to build this next generation of citizens and engineers who have security mindset and doing the right things for the community.
Abhilash, thank you so much for taking the time to have a conversation today. I really appreciate your energy and your dedication to the community. All of these things that you're doing aren't even your day job of architecting hardcore virtualization, security, and encryption for the chips that we make at Intel. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
Subscribe to What That Means with Camille Morhard.